Welcome to What's the Story of Our History, brought to you by Goethe Institute, part of their Borneo history program. And co-hosting with me today, we have Aftar and Shari. And today's topic, we'll be covering agreement, treaty, Sabah and Brunei, the interpretation of sovereignty. To kick this off, I think Aftar is going to lead us into this.
Yeah, so interesting topic today that hasn't really been talked about, Shari. It's a system of administration. How does a kingdom claim ownership over a territory? What sort of system of administration did it introduce? System of taxation? And where did this system come from? You know,
Which kingdom are we talking about?
I beg your pardon?
Which kingdom are we talking
We're
about?
talking about Brunei.
Okay.
We're talking about, well, I'm going to use Sabah.
Mhm.
Okay, so that would be the appropriate name. Brunei's rule over the coastlines of Sabah and the rivers of Sabah. And where did this inspiration come from? Because it wasn't something that was created by the Brunei Sultanate exclusively in Borneo. It would appear that you could find this system of administration in other parts within Southeast Asia. But Shari, how does it all start?
Then I need to bring you all back to my early childhood.
Oh, let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, because about 40 years ago, when I grew up, I was exposed to a lot of story about the war, Murut War, war Dusun and Kadazan, war with the Brunei, Sulu, and Belingi in Iran, and so I was a bit confused when I grew up because we were under the colonial, which is before the Second World War and after Second World War. And then I was growing up with all these stories about war. Just a little bit of recap. My late grandfather was born in 1905. So obviously his father was born somewhere in 1800. I have this opportunity of growing up under my grandfather lah, because my father attached to the North Borneo Armed Police Constabulary in the 60s, so I grew up with my grandparents.
Your father was fighting in the jungles, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was everywhere. He was in the East Coast,
Fighting pirates.
fighting pirates.
East Coast would be
East coast of Sabah.
East Coast of Sabah. Yeah, somewhere in Tawau, Lahadatu, and Sandakan. My father. He also was sent to somewhere in Kelabakan, somewhere in Kalimantan. He was somewhere in Tenam. So he's everywhere back in the early 60s and 70s. But again, the story about this, as I told you, I'm confused because I don't get all this information in the textbook when I go to school. So
Yes.
when I read through the I cannot compare the story between my grandparents and the information that I learned from school. So what I did on my spare time, there are two locations, my favorite location now. I'm staying in Sembulan. So there are two locations which is my favorite location now. One will be the Sabah State Library, of which is somewhere near Gaya Street, and the other location is the Sabah State Archive,
okay.
of which on the other side, which is in somewhere near Kinau. I walked to these two locations from Sembulan.
Wow.
That's how deep is my interest in history. I cannot find much information in the Sabah State Library apart from books lah. But most of the books written by Western writers or author, and most of the information does not really
Answer your question.
tally to the information that was told by my grandparents. In a nutshell, my grandparents told me that Sembulan used to be a wilayah. Wilayah means a territory, one of so many hundreds of Brunei territories. So this is the question, territory. How many territories? So I have this burning desire to know how many territories is it. So where's the territory and where is the boundary? I can't get all this information the first 20 years of my research, because when I went to Sabah State Library, all I found is treaties, but it's not a complete treaty. So I went to Tun Fuat Library. This way I got some basic information because this way Tun Fuat Yayasan Sabah, this way they kept some of the treaty. So now, actually there is a burning desire where to find all this information. So
what treaty did you find?
Actually, I found a treaty about Sembulan.
Oh.
Dated 1898. So I was surprised, and I didn't only find treaty about Sembulan. I found a few, but it still doesn't answer because the concept of administration, taxation, kingdoms, sovereignty, influence are actually quite new about it because, as you all know by now, I'm a banker by profession, and I don't understand the rules of administration because when you read early history of North Borneo, they all start with Pegapeta. Pegapeta visit in Brunei. And then from there on, there are attacks that Brunei more or less have a settlement, and there's a sultan in Brunei, and there are richness in Brunei. So basically, that is the only information that you know early history of North Borneo. Early history North Borneo in the early chronology talk about Brunei. So I say, that's probably the answer that I'm looking for. Because, of course, in Sabah, there are already a lot of engagement and discussion talking about the Dusun history, the Momogun history, the Bajau history, and, so there are so many history spoken. But again, in our previous episode, we were talking about timeline and chronology. So I go back to read a lot of information from Brunei. From there, I discover Brunei specifically, Pusat Sejarah Brunei came out with a lot of books and write-ups about early history of Brunei. And when you read books and early history of Brunei, they managed to bring back their history to almost 2,000 years ago.
Were these books by
Pusat
the
Sejarah
British as well? Or were it...
No, this is book published by Pusat Sejarah Brunei.
Okay.
So, in my talk, I always say if you want to talk about North Borneo historiography, you need to combine with Brunei historiography because a lot of our information, our historical past, kept in Brunei. And amazing facts that if you were to look to early empire, for example, we look at Temasek, we look at Sriwijaya, Majapahit, Malacca. A lot of people doesn't want to talk much about Brunei early history.
Yeah, true.
And we have a large number of Brunei community here in Sabah. And there's a lot of information that yet to be uncovered. One of the story that we touched today, or one of the item topic that I want today, is the early history of the how Brunei acquired North Borneo. So again, this is the information that I gathered from Pusat Sejarah Brunei. I can mention the book, which book that mentioned it. Brunei acquired North Borneo by way of invasion, meaning they attacked North Borneo more than 21 times. So when this thing happened somewhere around, say 1400 to 1500, somewhere around there. There's not a lot of conversation or communication, discussion or polemic about this matter. But again, this is something that worth discussing in the future. But again, it's not so easy for Brunei to attack all North Borneo coastal area because in order for them to acquire the sovereignty of North Borneo, they have to conquer North Borneo, and they acquire North Borneo by way of conquest.
This is the sort of the period where the Majapahit is in decline already.
Exactly.
And Brunei merely replaces the Majapahit as a tribute collector establishment.
So did that mean did they inherit the army soldiers as well, or were they mercenaries, or how did Brunei?
So this is also not so much talk about who is the army of the Bruneian. Again, based on all the information that we gather so far, in Sarawak they have the Kayan army, the Dayak army, and here in North Borneo, two tribes for certain are their ex-armies. One will be the Lotut Dusun army in Tuaran, of which they shown loyalty to the Brunei Sultanate. Another one is the Bajau Sama.
Wow.
The Bajau Sama was once the naval force of Brunei Sultanate. But apart from Bajau Sama, almost all the sea people, which is the Iranun, Banini, even the Sulu at one time was under the control of the Brunei.
I may be ignorant, but I thought Papar would be a big influence with that era.
Papar?
Yeah.
Papar is one of the early settlement or Brunei settlement. But again, they don't mention Papar back then. As early as 1600, Papar area, there's one location they call it Kinarut. That was the first Brunei settlement in North Borneo.
1600?
1600. And there was a civil war in Kinarut somewhere around 1660 to 1673. So again, when we talk about Brunei and about conquest, we are talking about how Brunei gives certain area to certain people. So if you look at the entire North Borneo, on the east coast, normally they will put the Pangeran Temenggung.
What is the rank of a Temenggung?
Temenggung is general, head of naval force. But in Brunei, Temenggung means head of their army.
Oh, okay.
Foreign minister?
No. It's the army, General Simo.
Okay.
General Simo. So he in charge what? Which is he in charge the naval force and they in charge of the infantry unit. Infantry normally indigenous people.
Oh.
And that's how good is Brunei. They always use all this army, which is either the Dayak or the Orang Laut as part of their armies.
Brunei has its own military, but it's not a large force.
Yeah.
So they start combining from different indigenous groups.
How did that combination happen? Was it like payment, or was it like we do not harm your village? Or
This is how it started. When we look at the treaties that we compile, each pangeran they can set up their own army.
Okay.
So meaning they can have their own troops. So if they open up a settlement, say the settlement have say 500 people, all the adult male is their army on that area, the settlement. So that settlement in charge of their own protection and they pay tax to the pangeran.
To pangeran, the ketua.
So actually, that's the way when we talk about treaty, we talk about territory. And we talk about sovereignty and we talk about influence.
Speaking of that, what is the definition of treaty in this situation?
If you ask me, treaty is defined as international agreement in writing between two countries or among more than two countries. Such agreement is also known as convention, protocol, or as a pact. So it must involve international agreement. Treaty is an international agreement. So we will touch about the treaty in detail shortly after, but we want to talk about how the Brunei divide their territory in North Borneo.
Okay.
Establish the
system of administration. This is the unique system. I believe not many people know about the unique system of Brunei administration. They divided North Borneo, the entire North Borneo, into three type of administrations. One, they call it Sungai Kerajaan. You see, if you look at Sabah map, every river is actually boundary, and each boundary cover to certain area, and that every river in North Borneo. You look at North Borneo, every river actually is a boundary, and the distance between certain river to another river is the area of the territory. So they divided into 3 segments. One is Sungai Kerajaan. Sungai Kerajaan means that river, from this river, that territory belong to the Sultan. So meaning tax collection all goes to the Sultan. Second territory will be Sungai Tulin. Sungai Tulin means from this river to this river belong to certain pangeran. And this pangeran normally are royalty, either the sibling or the cousins of the Sultan. And then the tax collection of that area belong to that pangeran.
Okay.
Whether he want to share to the Sultan, that is the arrangement they do, share to the Sultan, because Sultan derive their power or their income from collecting tax from the pangeran as well. The another area which is not belong to the pangeran or to the Sultan, they call it Sungai Kuripan.
Sungai?
Kuripan. So there are certain territory in North Borneo, they call it Sungai Kuripan. Sungai Kuripan means they appoint a pangeran, but the pangeran is not the owner of the land or the territory. He only a caretaker of that area, or probably administrator of that area, and he collect tax. And of course there are sharing
between the Sultan
and the pangeran.
Okay.
So this is the unique system before 1877.
This is
the system, the early area of this territory, apart from the 21 attempt to conquer North Borneo, which is in early 1300, 1400 and 1500, is the 6th area, of which Sultan Saiful Rizal given the territory to the father of Sultan Abdul Hakul Mubin. That 6th area, which is very important history of North Borneo, but always overlooked and never mentioned, never written in the history book, is actually an area of Marudu,
Yes.
Beringi, Bangi, Mampakul, Lawas, Mambakut,
and
Bukau. So meaning the northern Sabah, which is, if you look at the map, the northern Sabah is actually Marudu and Bangi are given to the family member of Sultan Abdul Hakul Mubin, the family mother. This is actually a wedding gift. When the Sultan of Brunei married to the daughter of Sultan Saiful Rizal, Sultan Saiful Rizal daughter married to the family member of Sultan Abdul Hakul Mubin. So actually to the father, to his father. Sultan Abdul Mubin father is Sultan Muhammad Panjang. So he's a gift. And then 6 areas. So this is the first 6 known area. They call it Pusaka. Pusaka means Sungai Tulin. So along the years, 2 on the top, the rest, the other 4 will be on the southern area, which is Bukau, Mampakul, Mambakut, and Lawas. So meaning, if this is the story actually in line with my grandparents' story. My grandfather told me there was a Raja here in Sabah. They call it Raja Sabah. Sabah, not Aceh. S-A-B-A. Then his name was Raja Pulau. I say, who is Raja Pulau? He say, Raja Pulau is Raja Gayo. I say, who is Raja Gayo? Raja Gayo or Raja Pulau, none other than Sultan Abdul Hakul Mubin, and his family member opened up a settlement from Kota Marudu to Lawas, the entire coastal area. So you see, the first group of people who actually occupy the coastal area are all members of Sultan Abdul Hakul Mubin family. And if you ask me where his family coming from, Sultan Abdul Hakul is from the household Bolkiah. Sultan Abdul Hakul Mubin is from the first Bolkiah. So meaning they are originally house of Bolkiah. So there are 2 group of house Bolkiah. One is in the Philippines and one is in North Borneo. That's one of the reasons why the Philippines are always emphasis that North Borneo belong to them. But because they are actually originally from here, they are the group of people who opened up Manila, Luzon. Back then,
we're not saying that the people of the Philippines originate from North Borneo. What we're saying is the administration of the Philippines during that period of time when the Brunei Empire, the sphere of influence, had reached to the Philippines and they had ruled over the Philippines for a short period of time, were from Brunei, and that families were established there from Brunei as well. So before the arrival of the Spanish.
Before the arrival of the Spanish.
Okay.
And when the Spanish came over, there were a few famous wars.
This is still 1800s, right?
No.
We are looking somewhere around 1600.
Oh my goodness, okay.
So we have to go back in time. And this is all the information that you cannot find in the book.
Yeah.
But this is information exactly what we need to teach Sabahan, because we're not just teaching them, sharing with them the early history. We have to accept this information and move on. Or else this information still...
the sphere of the Brunei influence, the spread of the Brunei Empire is mid-15th century. So that's mid-1400s. And for about 100 years, till about the mid-1500s when the Spanish arrive. And then its river administration system comes into play around that time as well.
The river administration system, the first non-information was in 1500. So which is on the 16th century.
Yep.
So this is the information that's absent from our history book. And we also wanted that this information to be included in our future history textbook, because they must know who is the early administrator of all this area, or else people will always think that East Coast belong to Sulu and West Coast belong to...
Was most of these documents that you found that supports all this, was it from the British archives?
Yeah, sad to say, a lot of this information are not available in our Sabah State archive, and also not available in most of our libraries, and it's also not available in our textbooks. Of course, when we talk about this, people will always say, "Hey, Shari, that is the information that you share is controversial," and they always say that the information that we share is non-mainstream, and the information is that the one that we share does not exist. You see, of course, does not exist in their source of reference, of which from 1881 and above, but they exist somewhere.
Yeah.
Where is in Brunei. And we cannot discount Brunei is another country. We don't share information with them, or they don't share information. We cannot do like that in history. We have to go beyond geopolitics. We have to go beyond borders to gain information. And we cannot deny the fact that there are movement of people, migration, there are influence somewhere, kingdoms and sultanate and the birth of sultanate and the new sultanate come into power.
People moved. There are no borders at that period of time.
Yeah.
So it was very common for people to move for many reasons. But what is obvious in the collection of taxes is not just within Sabah in the 1500s. It's also in the Philippines, Luzon, Palawan, Sulu. All the kingdoms and establishments, communities were paying some form of taxes to Brunei. Again, until the Spanish arrive, and then everything changes then. So
the important thing here is that's the reason why we come out with this Borneo history podcast, because we want to share to the audience and general public that a lot of information actually exists and written in Jawi. And it took me almost 20 years to search each and every one of them. In actual fact, if I have the fun, if I have the capability, I could have got all this information 60 or 40 years ago, because most of this information are actually kept in London. So we are lucky nowadays with the advance of technology again, and the context that we have in the historical society. We managed to bring back all this information, and we would love to share all this information. I want to tell you a little bit why treaty is very important.
Yes.
We have actually more than 300 years of compilation of treaty that we actually never really discuss. There are a few people who are actually very interested on collecting all this information. There are people like Cornell Kavanagh in 1859 to 1867. He compiled some of these treaties, but it's not sufficient. And then state government, the state settlement government, they also compiled this treaty. Why treaty is important back then? Because this is an international agreement. This is where they want to understand how far is the boundary of their administration. And then the state government actually spent some time collecting, and by 1888, they compiled another list of treaties. Back in 1924, Maxwell and Gibson compiled more than 140 documents between 1786 to 1921. This is treaty about strait settlement and Borneo, Sarawak. It involved on a lot of international treaties. It involved quite a number of countries, which is Spain, Netherlands, American, Portuguese, Germany,
Austro-Hungarian.
So there's a lot of
these treaties were with North Borneo. Was it Brunei, or was it everybody involved?
This is how they start collecting all this information. So where we come into the picture, we come into the picture where when we study all the collection done by Kavanagh, Strait Settlement, Maxwell and Gibson, Allen, Stockwell, and Wright, and Gallup, and book about treaties, we found out that there's a lot of other information still missing about North Borneo and Sarawak and Brunei and Labuan and Sulu as well.
Treaties and agreements are not new. So when I say new, we're not talking about like the last 100 years. People have been engaging lawyers. People have been bankers. There have been financiers. There have been agreements signed going back 200, 300, 400 years before. So it goes back significantly further back in time, not just recently only. People, I think there's this misconception that lawyers only just suddenly appeared and agreements and treaties only just started getting written, recently, and that's not the case.
One of the reasons why this agreement and treaty are so important, because it cover our internal relation and external relations. All our affairs back then, all arranged by treaties and agreement.
Yes.
We are actually dealing with European nations. So whatever they did, they put it into contracts. I think that is our friend David favorite word. Contract, David. Contract.
Sultanates,
yes,
kingdoms, Muslim kingdoms are signing agreements. They are signing agreements, going back in time. It's not a new concept.
If you read the history of manuscript, there for the last few hundred years, all these letters have been traveling around the world. A communication letter between Sultan and government. So all these documents we consider an important source of reference to our history, because this is what we call it primal source. This is the document exists on that period of time. You will be surprised that this document will be dated 1500, 1600, and it still exists. The only thing is we need people to actually study and analyze all these documents.
I'm gonna not segue lari a little bit. I noticed a lot of the treaties were in Jawi. How did that happen? If you're dealing with the British, and was it because of the Brunei Sultanate?
No, back then Jawi. So there are certain time frame where there are influence of the Ottoman Empire.
Oh, okay.
And there are also influence from Arab,
Yeah.
of which they prefer communication, or they learn communication by way of Jawi. So this Jawi become one of the medium of communication back then. There are certain period of time where even in Sarawak, I found, even though they don't speak Jawi, but they written in Jawi. So it's a medium of communication back then.
Okay. It's just a form of medium of communication. Okay.
Yeah,
It's not the sultan it's not the sultans that are writing these agreements or letters. They have people within the royal court who may be writing letters, and sometimes the people doing the writing are not necessarily natives or from that particular territory. You will find there are Arab scholars, Persian scholars that are within the royal court that actually perform duties as well. It's not exclusive, that it's only people from that territory. So,
if you read the treaty,
Okay.
which in our collection, you can find significant amount of facts inside there. And you also will be able to establish key events. You also learn good lesson from that treaty alone. And all the information, the facts, the event, the lesson that you learn are actually relevant to our national sovereignty. Why I say important? Because they talk about boundary,
Okay.
when they decide the boundary. For example, we are talking about friendship agreement between the American and the British with the Brunei.
Okay.
Somewhere around 1840s, which is 1846, 1847, they signed a treaty with Brunei. So this is the early context between Brunei and European powers like the American
And the British.
the British. And the treaty signed in 1846 with the American, leading to American open up a consulate in Brunei.
Brunei, yes.
And then treaty that signed with the British in 1847, ending up opening up of Labuan.
yeah.
Of another British settlement in Labuan.
Oh.
So that's why you see, treaty actually is an international agreement between two international body, which is Brunei and all this information are actually kept on a higher level, meaning it's between the British government and the Brunei government. We in Sabah does not have access to this
information.
to all this information, but that agreement, that treaty actually covered Sabah. For example, the 1877 treaty. It cover Gaya Island, Sepanggar. It cover Mangatal.
Was this because they recognized Brunei as not ruling but having control of the area?
That's our point. Treaty actually tell us our national sovereignty. That explain where are we in this equation. But since it's not in our textbook, it's not discussed not openly, it's not actually researched, and it's not been shared, a lot of people will come up with all sort of theories.
Do you remember
theories.
Lawas and Limbang, right? Charles Brooke was trying to cede those territories from the Sultan of Brunei.
This is interesting fact.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay, if you read treaty per se, back in 1840s, 47, 46 or 47, James Brooke actually acquired Mengkabong. Call concession from Mengkabong to a certain area in Sarawak. And because James Brooke kept that more or less concession area, Lawas supposed to be under Sabah, when chartered company acquire not Borneo, it cover Lawas. In order for them, Lawas
Was part of Sabah.
was part of Sabah.
Yeah.
But because James Brooke have this concession area in Mangkabo, so he have to exchange, the chartered company exchange that territory. So as that chartered company have full control of North Borneo. It's not an easy process. The chartered company established an state of administration in North Borneo. Not as easy as what people expected. When they came to Sabah, they took the land piece by piece. It's not like the entire Sabah. The interior of North Borneo are not covered in the sense that it's still considered terra nullius, meaning no man's land. Interior of North Borneo.
The agreements, the treaties, the agreements that are signed are only for the coastlines and rivers.
Most of the treaty cover the coastal area, coastal and islands and rivers.
And rivers, yeah.
But of course, that's why I say all these treaty must be properly analyzed. Another significant fact about this treaty, some of them actually used in the hearing of the ICJ on overlapping claim with another country. One thing I need to share here, when we read treaty, when we understand treaty, what we're trying to do is to develop what we call it national consciousness and justice from colonial power, where British rule was also normally based on agreement. So meaning we thought that there is no such agreement exists, but British rule are actually governed by agreement. They have agreement where agreement are needed. So there are lots of contracts out there that we need to establish, and then and the existence of this treaty also is a testimony of events that transpire between rulers and colonial powers, kept for a long time unknown to people. So what I'm trying to say here, a lot of general public doesn't want to talk about it or doesn't want to touch about this issue because they do not know such agreement exists.
Give you an example. So the Brookes are trying to acquire, I can't remember if it was Lawas or Limbang, and they're pressuring the Sultan of Brunei, give it up. And the Sultan of Brunei,
the area is Limbang.
And he's very upset. He's really upset. And so, he doesn't want to give it up. And what does he do? He doesn't write to the British. He may have written to the British. I haven't seen the letter for that. But he writes to somebody else within his faith. He writes to the Sultan of the Ottomans, all the way in the Ottoman, which is modern-day Turkey, right? He writes a letter there complaining, they've taken my hand. Now they want to take my arm. And he's just so upset. But that's the level of diplomacy and communications, Sultans and rulers of kingdoms were prepared to do. There was established diplomacy, diplomatic ties, and so forth. Treaties and agreements meant something. They carried weight, and sometimes we underestimate the importance of signing an agreement and how important it is the future of a kingdom or a sultanate.
So this means a lot of change of hands happened. I say change of hands loosely not by force or by military strength, but instead of discussion, negotiations, and contracts.
I call it diplomatic and political maneuvers between the colonial and the warring kingdom, feudal kingdom. When I say maneuver, mean British become a middleman to solve problem between all these warring feudal kingdom. For example, in North Borneo, the warring feudal kingdom is Sulu and Brunei. We Sabah people or Sabah land, for example, actually it kept in the dark between these two sultanates, you see. So by not understanding this integrated and autonomous rule by all these warring feudal kingdom, we do not understand what they're trying to tell us in the modern sense. Unless you are a person of history, then you read what actually happened in terms of all these treaties that they make between the colonial power and the feudal kingdom. Then we understand clearly that actually they are related, they are correlated, and we know a clear definition now between what is sovereignty and what is influence. In North Borneo, the sovereignty before 1877, I would say state clearly, is under Brunei, only coastal area and island and river. But again, as far as influence, yes, on the east coast there are some influence of the Sulu, but Sulu and Brunei, they are interrelated. They were actually family members. So
through marriage.
And then I could have said that East Coast actually given to one of the son to administer, but not as a owner, administer. But when the father passed away back in 1600, the son more or less, or son or the descendant on the other part of the family, this is family rivalry, would say, oh no, that belongs to my father.
Well, the relationship declines. The relationship breaks down significantly, doesn't it?
Because the newer generation doesn't have the same.
Yeah, but we're not really talking facts anymore. It's just what
speculations
passed down from generation, what is told. But at some point in time, the relationship breaks down. So Brunei's sphere of influence declines. That is not in denial. It's just a matter of when. When is that period that their influence declines on the East Coast? And in the North, Marudu, there is a decline. But it's just a matter of which period and when. So, yeah.
I would consider treaty as a documented history. And it defined our identity in our quest to preserve national heritage and national heritage. So that's why treaty is very important. To examine, to analyze, and to understand what the scope. Actually, I read each and every treaty. I have more than 100 over treaties. Just cover North Borneo a lot. That does not take into consideration agreement with investors. I also have a complete list of documents with investors. And this took me about 20 years to complete. I managed to...
1877 to 1903.
Actually, this is second edition. I got the first edition is actually from 1847 to 1870s.
Yeah. So this is a 2-volume book of every single agreement for North Borneo in Jawi. Yeah. And it's over 400 pages.
It's more than 400 pages.
But this is just volume 1. It's 2 volumes.
What's so interesting about this? Actually, I like to learn a few things here. The chop, which sultanate, and what is the content of this manuscript. And it contains amazing information. For example, the Pangeran can introduce text and he can collect text.
On his own will
his own will.
Wah, suka hati dia.
So many type of text lah. Kalau mau kapal berlabuh, teks. Kalau mau
hantar barang
kenduri makan teks. Actually mau buat rumah lagi satu teks. And then to conscript army from that area. And then they also can recruit their own army. So that's why some of the pangeran are very strong and very powerful, to the extent at the end of the day, Brunei becomes smaller because they are actually stronger pangeran than the others, and they involve in all sort of businesses. And apart from trade, they also involve on slave trading.
Lord.
They also involved in natural resources as well.
And some pangerans break off.
And jungle produce. Yeah. So you see, some of the pangeran are more enterprising than the others.
Has there been issues where, or like documents you found where Pangeran A takes over Pangeran B punya
Yeah,
locality?
yes. So all this information should be actually
Public
written
knowledge.
in our textbook so as that they understand. For example, Penampang. When the name of Penampang exists, to me is very important because my grandmother from Penampang, and then I cannot find Penampang. I only found word Putatan in 1700. So meaning Penampang written information only probably in 1800. So before this, there are no written information about Penampang. Penampang meaning big rock. So my ancestor is coming, my maternal grandmother is coming from Penampang. I took some time to actually go through each and every area in Penampang. I divided into 20 over location and I visit each location. What I found was I found two major tribes there in Penampang. One of them is Bangka Kon, and the other one is Tanggara. And these two tribes actually merged, become the modern day Kadazan.
Oh,
yeah. So that's what I established based on my research. Probably other people might have different information, but the early Kadazan people are actually from Papar. And as you know just now, Papar, whereas in Kinarut was the earliest Brunei settlement.
Yeah.
And there was a war there for 12 or 13 years, And then it's quite impossible for Brunei, unable to conquer a settlement by the name of Kinarut without the involvement of both naval army and indigenous people. So meaning the Kinarut war could be a war between Sabah and Brunei. The might of Sabah army, both naval and infantry, fought against Brunei.
Was this part of the Muhyiddin Mubin
yes.
civil war?
Yeah, that's part of that war is a catalyst that actually weakened Brunei. But we never know. Actually, based on the kampung folk in Kenaruk, when I talk to them, they say, itu perang antara Brunei sama Sabah. Macam gitu. Ada perang nggak? Ada. Macam gitu. But in Brunei, they talk about a war between two sultanates, which is Sultan Hakumuddin and Sultan Muhyiddin. They talk about that Sultan Hakumuddin killed the previous sultan and Sultan Muhyiddin tried to recover back but I mean, different area have different versions of the story. The story that I get from one of the eldest person in Kenarut say it was a war between Sabah and Brunei. But again, never written. It's only an oral story. We never know the truth
until we find some documentation somewhere.
Until we find some documentation.
What we've just talked about the last hour, why is it so important to Malaysians and also anybody for that matter who wants to understand Sabah history and the relationship between Sabah and Brunei, Shari? Why is it important?
Actually, if you love official history, a contact between not Borneo and outside world, treaty is the source of information that you need to read first.
Just even a basic understanding, just a very basic understanding. It forms the backbone of understanding who ruled and who had sphere of influence and
because here we have so many community I mean, I'm not biased to any. I'm not prejudiced to any race, but the one who come up with so many treaties are Bruneian and the colonial people, the European. Back then, probably some of the indigenous people, they have their own way of treaty or agreement. Actually, that's the area that I'm doing research now, because I found out that there are so many treaty and peacemaking, but not written. What they did was they installed a monument
Megalith, yeah.
monument, and they do some ritual. That is a peacemaking arrangement, but not on paper. Probably because Western culture, everything were actually written on papers, lah. But the culture and heritage
It's not.
is not our ritual and culture.
Everything
Does
is
not.
verbally.
Everything was actually through some ritual ceremonies and whatnot.
So he's talking about indigenous
Yeah.
groups, I think. Yeah. So we have what they call Batu Sumpah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Actually, treaty also important because it's an essential characteristic that to refer to facts, to be given precedent in order for our society become a society based on knowledge. Because when I go out there, a lot of people still talk to me about my grandfather and my grandfather father and my grandfather who tell me the stories, lah. Of which I will respect that statement. But again, how far is our memory compared to written
documentation.
Different written documentation? There might be true, can be accepted back then, but now in a modern day, everything have to refer based on documentation. That's why my research for the last 20 years focus on document research. Why document research can actually steer away the conversation about our history, coming back to facts rather than come back
said,
to
she said.
oral
innuendos.
innuendos or histories lah, or oral histories lah.
It's kind of like what Malaysia is facing with the claim of the descendants from the Philippines, that they once owned Sabah and that it was a lease. It's the same thing. We have to look at documentary facts.
When we
evidence.
show people all these treaties, actually this information actually discourage people. Oh, ada agreement pula.
Yeah.
So they discourage those people from not talking about facts. Is it? So we also trying to stop people for not talking about unsubstantiated fact. So we want to tell them, hey, agreement exists. How come you say this is not right, this is wrong, where the treaty exists? Is it?
Yeah.
So that is one of the point why treaty also very important. Actually, treaty form a legal basis for the development of North Borneo toward modern states. So if we want to know how we develop into a modern state now, actually we need to look back at all the treaties.
Of how the states were broken up, is it?
Also, treaties also very important because if you want to find understanding of government policy, you have to do research on the treaty as well. So all the treaties also explain about the government policy. For example, James Brooke, when he signed a treaty with Brunei, James Brooke in Sarawak, actually part of the treaty or agreement that he signed was talking about the abolition of slave and piracy. So you see, it became policy for them to attack Kota Marudu and Tampasuk, Abai, Pandasan, and Tunku to eradicate all these pirates.
But it's the Sultan of Brunei at that time that asks him to do that, doesn't he?
Yes. So this is not many people want to tell the stories. Why the British Armada attacked Tampasuk? Why British Armada attacked Mambaku? Why British Armada attacked Pandasan, Abai, Kota Marudu 1845, and why they attacked Tunku in 1851, and why they attacked Omadal Island in 1870. So all this information actually very important, and I wonder why it was not in our textbook. That's the reason why Borneo history exists. It's not that we want to be, we want to create story, but we want to share a story of which interesting, relevant, and our Sabah history.
Yes. And I think we're on the right track.
I think the other thing also to take note of, this all sounds complicated. It sounds difficult to comprehend and understand. But if you can explain it, even in very simple terms, to a secondary school student, let's say you are trying to teach secondary school students a basic understanding of the history of Sabah. If you can explain to them in the most simplest of terms what this means, what agreements mean, what treaties mean, what sovereign means, it gives them a very good basis going forward of understanding, oh, okay, so this is how we were formed, this is how things were done that time, how the coastline was ruled by the Brunei Sultanate. And of course, when you go into sort of university level, those that want to know more about the history of Sabah, they go in maybe into social sciences or history and so forth. Then you go into the real in-depth stuff, where you talk about the agreements and so forth. But we have the material. It's here. It's ready. It's ready to be shared. But yeah, it's a complicated
process. What I can say also, without a proper knowledge of treaty, it will be a bit difficult for certain person or people to visualize the conglomerations of several territory. How
all of them
all the connection of all this territory that could eventually merge, become a single entity, which is Sabah.
Yes.
So there are so many treaties. You need to understand understand all the treaties and when is the treaty expires and whatnot. And with this understanding, then you understand this is the early formation of Sabah. If Sabah does not appear as Sabah, wholesome Sabah as we understand now.
It's all bits and pieces.
It's all bits and pieces.
For me, it kind of helps me see how the economic of it was as well. The treaties. I mean, understanding the treaties and how they were run with Pengirans and everything, right? For me, it makes me see, that's how this area matured faster than this area, how this mature had better governance than this area, and how things were switched around, moved around. And it was not like you said, it's not one entity that's just Sabah. It's all these different localities.
Yeah.
Give you an example. Let's talk about one controversial area. Let's talk about Marudu. You all right with that?
Okay.
All right. So the general belief is that Marudu was a kingdom on its own. It was formed sort of the late 1700s, early 1800s, and it just suddenly appeared. That's the sort of narrative that sort of exists. But that's not correct. If you go and look at Brunei documents and Brunei history, Marudu is one of the first territories that were established by Brunei in the late 1400s, early 1500s. So, one of the main territories.
I was surprised that we tried to remove Brunei from Sabah history. I cannot accept that because in order for us to look back in our past, we need to look back at Brunei history. So when you combine Brunei history and Borneo history, then you can see the continuation of events that actually happened. All actually have influence from Brunei to North Borneo. What actually happened for the last 600 years? The consciousness of the people of Sabah grew. They realized that, we were governed by an outsiders. There are a sense of freedom or where they want to feel true freedom. Over hundreds of years, both interior and the coastal area actually was an area of I told Avatar is an area of frontier where survival of the fittest. Same goes in the interior. When I say coastal area, there was war between the Orang Laut tribes. A lot of people doesn't want to go there because there's not a lot of information written about the war between the Orang Laut tribe. Orang Laut mean the sea people tribes. And then there also war between the indigenous tribe, be it the Morut or the Dusun.
Intertribal
wars. And all these war, some of them are just because of tradition, culture, and some ritual to reach manhood, then you need to bring back head of your enemy or your neighbors.
Yeah.
And this led to a continuous war between tribes. And I would say, I would have to give credit to the colonial and those Western European people who came to North Borneo. They not just stop the piracy and the kidnapping.
Yeah.
They also stop this
intertribal wars, headhunting,
ruthless, cruelest headhunting tradition. Or else, North Borneo will be
Full of hits.
full of perhaps full of
it would have been unstable.
unsafe area, and I think a number of population. We have low number of population.
Yeah, and I think they'll be more spread out.
Can I give two examples of how the Europeans, number one, observations of how things change and how they can change when rivals come together and they unite to fight one common enemy. And then the second one is how sad intertribal wars can be. So the first one I'm going to give you the example is when the Tangara, who are up in the Crocker Range Mountains, Tagahas are just up in the Crocker Range Mountains.
Okay.
Today, many villages still exist there today, and their enemies are down below, along what is today the Moyok River. And so you have a major community in what is today Kelopis. Kampung Kelopis still exists today, but that was a very major community along the river. And they were at war for the longest time, but they all unite together, come together to fight one common enemy, which is the Brunei tax collectors. So they actually go to war against the Brunei tax collectors. And the second example I'll give you, which is very sad, and it's written by Whitty. So when Whitty is a Austro-Hungarian adventurer, comes here, joins the chartered company, and he's actually one of the early writers that goes into the interior and actually sees the world within the interior of North Borneo. And one of the very sad recordings he makes over the 2 or 3 year period in his journals, he comes to a village down south in what is today the Beaufort area of Sabah, along the Padas, and there's intertribal wars going on there. And he stumbles into a village where he meets the native chief, and the village has just been attacked, and the village chief's wife has been killed. It's not only killed, she's beheaded, And it's such a sad scene and a sad period that they eventually agreed to a compromise. They agreed to compensation between the two tribes. But he witnesses all of this. And if you read Whitty's accounts, it gives you a sense of the world, what it was like before the chartered company really went in to sort of put an end to these intertribal wars and so forth, good or bad. That's for another topic for another day as far as colonialism is concerned. But this was the world that existed during the period under Brunei influence, and this was the world that existed before the Brunei influence came. So
back to answer the Kota Merudu, he opened up a talk about 17 to 1800. It was under a kingdom or whatnot. I told it's not a kingdom because although Sharif Osman governed more than 20 over territories, he collected tax in that area. But again, he suddenly appeared in 1830s, and we know for the fact that in 1845 his port was attacked and he was killed in 1845. What I'm trying to say, history of North Borneo, such unique history, there is a situation of seize and cease. Seize and cease mean some people coming over and seize the territory and somebody ceded that territory, but from 1400, since the early Sultanate of Brunei, they only surrendered the sovereignty of North Borneo in 1877. So there's no such thing as Zulu say that North Borneo belong to them. Historically, what document that they have is actually a communication documents. But to the very fact, colonial government signed a treaty with Brunei, it's confirmed that they acquired the sovereignty from Brunei, not from Sulu. The whatever treaty signed with Sulu is an afterthought because in the East Coast we face issue with pirates.
Okay.
And there are also issue of geopolitical border where Spain are actually pursuing taking Holo or during that period.
Well, they're at war with a lot of the Moro kingdoms in the south. They call the Sultan, all the various sultanates and sultan and the rajas down the south Moros because they're Muslim. But that is a very, very unstable region. So there's a lot of migration as well to our coastlines.
And when people ask, hey, Sherry, where you get all your source of information? I think when we talk about history, people always talk about, hey, where's your reference? Where's your source? First and foremost, we managed to acquire more than 1 million pages of document. Me and Avatar also found few thousand documents from Australia. We found document we not found now. We actually collaborate with a group of people, an institution to acquire documents, and we actually go through all the documents, mostly from the National Archive of London Kew. But on top of that, we have to give credit also that we also visited Archive Negeri Sabah, which is in Sabah. We managed to find some document of which is not available in National Archive in London. We also have to give credit to Archive Negeri Sabah, of which they give us tremendous help in actually accessing almost of whatever document they have in their custody. But again, we create our own master index, so we know exactly what file available and what files not available. We also have to give credit to Pusat Sejarah Brunei because they come up with a lot of books and references of which we can refer, especially Pihin Jamin. He's one of the key driver of doing a lot of research about the relation between Brunei and North Borneo, Labuan, and Sarawak. He also quite instrumental of doing a lot of research that involve Eastern Archipelago, and even up to the extent of the relation between Brunei with China, with Arab country and India and whatnot, and Arab. We also have to give credit to Foreign and Commonwealth Office Library in London, India Office Library in London, Institute of Historical Research, University of London, National Archive, Washington. I visited there once. National Archive in London, Public Record Office in London, Royal Commonwealth Society Library in London, Sarawak Museum, which is a wealth of information there. Our Sabah Society, a wealth of information there. I also proposed and suggested for them to reprint some of their old collection journals. Library of the School of Oriental and African Study, because what we wish in Sabah actually, Borneo studies in some of the universities. Just do a research on Borneo. Singapore National Library, I went there from 2015 to 2000 until for 6 years. I traveled to Singapore and University of London Library. So don't stop at just going to certain area. Everybody say, all the information is actually in National Archive. Actually, no. Most of our information are everywhere. If I have the fund, if I have the time, health permitting, I want to travel to Amsterdam. to do engagement with them, a major university or what I said, to bring back some of our manuscript or information about Borneo. I want to travel to Spain to engage with their university over that side and to bring back as much information as possible about Borneo. I want to travel to China to bring back all those annals that written about North Borneo. You will be surprised that there's quite a number of annals in China talking about North Borneo as early as
400, 500?
About 1,000 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Or about 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I was talking about 400 AD and 500 AD.
Yeah. So about 1,500 years ago. So I also want to travel wherever our document exists in this world and to bring it back and to share with our younger generation, younger scholars. So as that whatever work that we did now in the past will be continued by them. We are more than willing to share all our research material
to
collaborate
story,
with a younger historian or researcher to know more about. We are already doing it now. We are engaging with scholars now, and we try to help a lot of students, especially those who are taking up their masters, to get the information from us, so as they can get a lot of information about treaties and whatnot.
I would just add that we also are very, very grateful as well, I think, to academics as well. In Malaysia, in Brunei, University Brunei, there's some wonderful professors and academics there that write wonderful research papers, which help open our minds a little bit to look in certain areas that we hadn't thought of looking in. Even UMS, we have some wonderful academics there who have done wonderful research and still do wonderful research as well, which, like I said, when I talked about this in our first episode, this is Sabah history is one big jigsaw puzzle with a lot of missing pieces.
Yeah.
And we're trying to build this jigsaw, and it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of help from many different people. It's not a one-man show. It's many people coming together.
History is not inclusive.
Yeah.
To those people are knowledgeable about history. History is not exclusive. It's actually inclusive.
Yes.
You can rope in as many people as possible, as long as they have deep interest in history and they have critical mindset. That I think the most important ingredient, because they have to ask why so many times. Why? Where is our sovereignty? How it developed? And they must have all these questions, and we must be ready to provide the answers. So I believe we cover our treaty story today.
I agree so too. It for me, it answers a lot of questions on treaties and how it impacts the formation of what Sabah eventually was, what eventually is, and the importance of understanding the treaty to see the context of where we are today.
Yeah.
So
if you want me to read a quick before we run chronology
okay.
About the connection treaties and sovereignties, we can say a period of 1500 to 1700, we are under strong influence of Brunei. So 1700, 1400 to 1700, so about 300 years, strong connection with Brunei. I mean, we are under their influence. Then they come this East India Company from 1700 to 1800. Yeah, everybody know Alexander Trampiel, Balambangan, Felicia Island. So we have connection with the East India Company and Brunei. And then also, if you notice, 1846, we have a treaty signed with Britain, and in 1850 we have a treaty signed. When we say we, it's Brunei with American. From 1865 to 1875, for 10 years, there is also a treaty between Brunei and the American Trading Company, ATC. In 1877, Overbeck then signed an agreement with Brunei to cover East Coast and West Coast in four territories, for treaties,
For treaties.
4 set of treaties, different treaties, plus 1 convention. Then in 1878, they signed a treaty with the Overbeck, and then signed with Sulu. In 1881, a start of the our chartered company is another treaty agreement between Overbeck then and British North Borneo Professional Association Limited, and then later on from 1941 we were under this Japanese occupation from
late 41, early 42.
1941 until 1945. And from 1946 to 1963, we are actually annexed by the Crown Colony. So we are under Crown rules, British Crown rule from 1946 to 1963. And from 1963, we signed another
where we are now.
Agreement. What everybody know is the formation of the Federation of Malaysia. So you see, the Brunei influence, whether we want it or not, actually we were influenced almost 600 years. Brunei influence here, and people doesn't want to talk about this 600 years of influence. They just simply want to talk about 1881 onward. So they just simply out from our school text syllabus.
Yes.
So my request is, please include this Brunei influence in Sabah.
Yeah.
Please, in Sabah history, please include the chartered company rules in Sabah from 1881 to 1946. Please include. There are a lot of events, and from 46 to 1963, and please don't remove all this information from our history book. So as that is good for us to know, it's good for our to build up the strong identity of Sabah, and is good for our future generation to understand all this information.
Yeah.
Over to you.
No, what you said is right. Absolutely spot on. And I think that was one of the primal motivations why I got into this, was realizing very late in my life how much history on Sabah has been missing, is never talked about, it's unknown, and it's not good. Because when you don't talk about the history of a territory and its people, people lose their identity. They don't know where they came from. They don't know the past. They don't know what their ancestors went through, socially, politically, and so forth. They don't know about migration, which is a very important part of Sabah history. Migration has been going on for the longest time. It's not something new. And understanding cultures and ethnic groups and backgrounds, understanding the indigenous people's history. There's so much to talk about with Sabah, which we don't really get a chance to do in history books, as Shari said. And if we can start with the most basic at primary level and work our way forward to secondary and so forth, and then university, offer it as an option for those that really, really want to know more, you can go in depth. It's there. The information is there. It's just a matter of whether there's a will. It really comes down to that. And that those decisions are made at a higher level. So, yeah.
It answered my question, my information in the past about paradox, about we actually have a lot of information, but our people here in Sabah unable to access this information. It's an issue of accessing all this information. So now we need to create an access for Sabahan to access all this information, so as that they can write all this information and probably share this information in the future, so as that we understand more about our culture and history, culture and heritage.
Well, this has been one clueless Sabahan who has learned a lot more about my history. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up today. So thanks to our Sabahan historians, Shari and Aftar. Thanks to Borneo History for giving us a spot to light up and shoot. Big thanks to Goethe Institute for making this happen and being part of the Borneo History Research Project. This is Chris Pereira signing off. Till the next one. Thank you, guys.
Cool. All right.